Hey everybody, welcome to Beyond Local, episode number 39. My name is Jeff Kimmel. I'm the Vice President of Sales and Marketing, and with me today is Brian Peters, our Head of Web Development. Brian, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me on.
Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Yep, pretty much.
Right. So if you haven't heard, hopefully you have, because we've talked about it on a lot of different podcasts, but Google's changing their algorithm, and it's going to impact site speed. And site speed is going to be part of the Google algorithm going forward. And so if you could see today, not only do I have Brian, the great mind, web developer right here with me, but he also brought his laptop. So we're really going to dive into this, find out a lot of different things about this Google algorithm, and we're going to show you some things on the screen that's going to help show you what we did, and hopefully it'll help you prepare for this change in the algorithm. So without further ado, Brian, why don't you tell us a little bit more about the problem or what we can expect coming out? So,
well, like you said, Jeff, Google's changing how they're doing, how their algorithm is ranking websites, and with an emphasis on making sure that your site loads fast, especially on mobile. When it comes to like SEO, it's really important to make sure that your strategy and your technicals and your content's airtight. But once you have that all solid, where do you go from there? Site speed optimization really helps kind of tip the needle in the right direction. And that's what we did with our website. We wanted to create a bespoke theme, essentially, that was custom built to our needs and the content and functionality that we wanted to have on our site.
Right. That's a great point when you talk about it. I mean, first get SEO lined up and then worry about your site speed, because that is coming. So when we hear about this Google algorithm coming up, site speed is going to be a factor. People say Core Web Vitals. Mm-hmm. What does that mean?
Well, Core Web Vitals are 6 metrics that Google uses to rank the performance of your site. It might be unfair to say it's just speed and just load time. There's other factors that are at play. So going through the list of the 6 metrics, first, contentful paint. How quickly do text and images appear on your site, or on the screen, rather? Time to interactive. How long does it take for the site to fully load and the user can start interacting? Speed index. How quickly do the contents of your site are visibly displayed? Total blocking time. How much time is blocked by third-party scripts, JavaScript, things like that while the site's loading? Largest contentful paint. How quickly do the largest elements take to load? Like if you have a large hero image above the fold on your site. And cumulative layout shift. Basically, do things shift around as the site's loading? Like it could be really intrusive if you try to click on a button, the site's still loading, and everything jumps around and you misclick on something. Those are the 6 primary factors that Google's using to rank your site.
I see that a lot. You know, you're always clicking. I hate when that happens. The site's loading. It's like, I just want to click on whatever, get a proposal. But it scrolls down to something else, and I go to a different page. I got to go back. That is very frustrating.
And that's especially true on mobile devices, since things are typically slower, especially if you're not on a Wi-Fi network, or, if you're in an area with poor, service.
Right. That's another great point, being on mobile. I was even talking about desktop. So you obviously had the foresight of this Google algorithm coming out, the knowledge on the Core Web Vitals. Yeah. And you proposed that, hey, we got to fix our own website, right? Mm-hmm. So you went in and you rebuilt our entire website, which I think a lot of people are going to have to do. They're going to have to make some changes to their website so that when this change happens, they're not as impacted as they may be if they don't make any changes, right?
That's correct.
So, I've seen the site, and I think, like I warned you in the beginning, this is going to be a little technical, but it's very informative. So, if you're not the right person, make sure you bring in your web developer. If you have any questions, let us know. But at this point, Brian, why don't you walk us through some of the things that you did for this new build, on how you improved it and prepared us for this Google algorithm update?
Sure. So like you said, we wanted to get ahead of the curve. Another thing to keep in mind is when these metrics go into play, it's going to take 30 days for Google to gather enough data on your website. So if your site's fast before this happens, you're just going to be ahead of the game. But what we did essentially was we built the website from scratch. Essentially, it's still based in WordPress, but we are trying to eliminate anything that might cause bloat or that's unnecessary. I mean, WordPress is very dynamic. There's so many ways you could extend it, but sometimes that just, might be too much. Page builders like Elementor or Beaver Builder, they're very popular, but they tend to add a lot of excess to the site that you may not need. They come equipped with all these tools that you can use to build beautiful websites, but it might be more than what you really need. So our logic here was that we wanted to build this site from just using bare bones WordPress, CSS, JavaScript, and PHP. Without really much else in the back end. Let's start with the theme. The theme.
And before you're recording, so everybody at home can see this right now. Great. All right, go ahead. Sorry.
So let's start with the theme. I used a theme called Underscores. You can find it at underscores.me. It's free to use. Essentially, all you do is type in what you want to call the theme and hit download, and you get a zip file with all the theme files that you would need to start a WordPress site. Things like your header, your footer, a 404 page, all the basic required files. And from there, you could start building. We have a few of the plugins that we use. Very basic plugins we have are, let me load up my plugins to show you guys. We're using, I think that the most important one is custom post type UI. And what this does, if you're not aware, WordPress operates on what's called pages and posts. Posts would be your typical kind of blog post, and page would be like a normal page. Well, you can create your own blog post types, but they could be whatever you want. And as you can see on the sidebar here, plugins. Sorry, our Wi-Fi is a little slow down here. Bear with us. But essentially, we use custom post types to create things like podcast posts, our team, awards that we've won, case studies. We can organize this all very nicely as a post, quote unquote. Coupled with that is advanced custom fields. And if you've never used advanced custom fields, it's kind of on the technical side, but paired with custom post types, you can do so much with it. It really opens, the door to a lot of functionality. My page finally loaded. So you can see I have advanced custom fields, custom post type UI. WP Rocket's a really good one. It's like a good supplementary kind of optimization plugin that you could get that will minify and combine all of your CSS and JavaScript files. It will handle how these assets are loaded on the page, and a whole bunch of other things like making sure that images are lazy loading, caching. It's a really great plugin. There's others out there, but we really like WP Rocket. As you can see, I have to update that too, but updates happen all the time, so I'm not too worried about it. Another plugin we really love is WP Forms. Really basic form plugin, but it has so many awesome features. Like you could set up Google CAPTCHA. You can do multi-step forms. You can, basically anything you want. And it has very minimal impact on, the load time. So we really, really like WP Forms. Another one that we stand by is Yoast Seo. It's by far the easiest way to handle your metadata, and it really is not too intrusive on, page speed.
So that's a lot of good stuff right there. I'm gonna pick your brain on some of it. Like
sure.
WP Forms is one for me. Like as you know, as sales and marketing, I'm constantly trying to put new forms on our site, so that people can engage with us. Talk about what their needs are. And I'm saying, hey Brian, I want to put this new form out. From one of our CRMs, and you're like, well, that's going to slow that down. So let's go ahead and build you a WP form.
Yep.
And we'll have it go into the CRM.
Yeah. And what we could do then, it'll give you, solid HTML that you could work with. And if you have some CSS knowledge, you can tweak it and make it look amazing if you want to. I really love the multi-step form feature. It kind of lowers the barrier because you can ask a simple question and then move on to step 2. And it gives the user kind of like a pathway to follow and helps with conversions.
Now the multi-step form, because I was going to ask that was going to be my next question. If you've put that in, this is for my own edification, but if the first field and they enter, let's say it's email address, and then they hit next, will that email address pass through?
Yeah.
Okay, so they don't have to go through all the whole piece. No. They can get that first.
Essentially, it's all one form, but broken up into sections, and each section is hidden until you hit the next step. So it's if you if you disabled all the CSS, you would just see one long form. But what it does is allow you to kind of compartmentalize it, just to make it more nice bite-sized chunks to go through. And it's great for like if you have a really complicated form or if you just want something simple. It's very robust.
Okay, great. So you talked a lot about the themes and the plugins and stuff like that. Was there anything else you did for this build that you want to share with anybody before we get into the tips and tricks?
Sure. Two tools that I highly recommend for evaluating how fast your site is GTmetrix and Google PageSpeed Insights, also known as Google Lighthouse. What you can do is go to just Google PageSpeed Insights and type in the URL of your website, and they'll generate a report based on mobile and desktop parameters, essentially. For mobile always seems to be the hard one to really hit above 90. You could see here there's a few, like total blocking times coming up as 350 ms, but these values tend to fluctuate slightly depending on where you're testing from or if there's traffic to your site. So those can kind of vary a little bit, but it'll also give you suggestions on what you can do to help increase the performance. And as you can see here, there's a few things that we could still do more to improve our performance on the site. But since we're hitting most or all of our metrics, then it might be a little bit of overkill at that point, but there's always more room for improvement. GTmetrix is very similar. It uses the same kind of algorithm, but it'll give you a little bit more expanded information. As you can see here, it's showing 3 of the core web vitals right up front: the cumulative layout shift, time, total blocking time, largest contentful paint, and they'll give you their own grade. Right now we're scoring B, but that's just because there's a few minor things we might have to fix. Scrolling down to the bottom, it'll show you exactly how long it takes for your site to load, how much data is being requested, and how that breaks down, whether it's images, fonts, JavaScript, CSS, and as well as total page requests. That could be internal assets or third-party scripts. And they also give you suggestions on how you can improve it, with a rating on if it's severe or if it's a low issue. They'll also give you some more information on the core web vitals. You can see that speed index here is a little bit high, which I'm not sure why, because if you look at the speed index on PageSpeed Insights, it's showing a different thing. So it's good to use both tools to kind of see how your site's performing. You can also, here's a full list of all the issues that you might have to fix. Under waterfall, you can see how every asset on your site is loading in what order, and this could help you identify what might be causing some problems.
Okay, that's awesome. And I see like colors, you know what I mean? So obviously I think green is good, red is bad.
Yeah.
Do you happen to know the thresholds? I mean, where do we want, our clients, our prospects, or anybody who has a website, like what kind of score should they be striving for, at least initially?
I think the most important kind of the first glance thing is the total fully loaded time. That gives you a good kind of understanding of, how long it takes the site to load, because I've seen cases where it's scoring 90% everywhere, but still a 11-second load time. That's kind of your first clue on there might be something wrong. So just because it says it's green doesn't mean there's not problems to be fixed.
That's great insight. I would just look at that and be like, hey, I'm getting a B. I'm good. But,
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like when it's taking 11 seconds, it's funny that we say that now too. Imagine back in the day, dial-up, 11 seconds. Now 11 seconds is bad for your website to come up.
Ultimately, though, you want to look at the PageSpeed Insight or Lighthouse score for mobile and desktop. Desktops usually ranks pretty high because they have a higher threshold for what could be an issue. Mobile, not so much, because mobile networks are slower than having, a broadband connection.
Right. Makes sense. Okay, great. One other thing, I don't think you mentioned it, but you did a lot of coding on your own on our build.
Yeah, you could say that. So everything was, I'll give you a little peek at some of the code we have. Everything is built with a coding language called Sass, which is essentially It stands for Syntactically Awesome Style Sheets. And it's an extension of CSS. If you install Node.js on your computer, you can, type a little terminal command and it'll compile all your SCSS files into regular CSS files. It's nice because if you look, so here's our podcast SCSS file. And if we look at the actual finished product, if I could find it here, podcast.css, you'll see all the CSS is minified, nice and tidy, no extra white space or anything else that might make your file larger than it should be. That's one real nice feature. One of the things that I love about it is the ability to create variables. So like the red color on our site is this code right here. And if we wanted to change that red globally, all we have to do is change it right here, and it'll update all the files, and you could go from red to blue in a split second. I have breakpoints for different devices. I have all the gradients set aside here so I can use them throughout my files. And there's really so much you could do with Sass, and I'm really just kind of, it's the tip of the iceberg here. But there's some really awesome, simple features that you can use to make your CSS writing a lot easier.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, what a fabulous job. So if you haven't seen our site, check it out and check out the speed. I want to ask you one more, because I know I found this one interesting when you and I were talking prior to this, the MAMP. Now, it's not really necessarily going to help you with your site speed, but it's going to help you when you're developing your website.
Yeah, exactly. MAMP is essentially a local host environment. And what you can do with a local host environment is you could set up your own web server on your computer without having to purchase for hosting or deal with servers. You could develop right in a folder on your desktop if you want to. That makes it super easy to load up a WordPress environment, get coding, and preview it quickly. And then when you're done, you can upload it to your server. Also, if you're making changes later on, you can safely edit things and experiment and without breaking your live site.
Right.
MAMP essentially stands for Mac, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. And these are the three core technologies that most web servers run off of. There's a lot of options out there. There's a Windows variation. There's a Linux variation. There's another software called Local by Flywheel, and that's more geared towards specifically to WordPress, but I'm kind of old school. I like to use my MAMP. I've been using it for years. But yeah, that's what I rely on. It's also great, like when we're working on some of our clients' sites and we're dealing with some issues, we can download a copy of their site, spin it up locally, and do debugging as needed without having to put their site at risk or anything like that. So it's a really great tool.
That's awesome. That's great. Okay. Well, we covered a lot here, and I know we went in really deep with a lot of technical stuff.
But always go deeper.
Yeah, I know. We could talk about this for a couple more hours if you wanted to, but I thought it was important. We covered what the algorithm is, what the core web vitals are, and then we really took a peek behind the curtain to see what you did for LSEO and our website, and showed some of the results that we're getting from it. So, is there anything else you'd like to add that we didn't cover? Or did we hit it all?
I have a couple awesome tips that I'd like to share.
Yes, let's do it.
Most people know about Chrome DevTools, but what you may not know is, if I can get my browser loading, what you may not know is there's some hidden features that are super helpful. One being, let me actually load up my local environment because the Wi-Fi here isn't the best. So here's an example of my local host. You'll see it's localhost.8888. And just my site is ready to go here. It might be in a bit of disarray in case I was editing things that I haven't uploaded yet. But I could give you a quick example of what I loved using Chrome DevTools for. First off, one of the best things, if we can get this running, is that you can emulate different mobile devices. So I could switch it to an iPhone 6 so I could test my layout on an iPhone. I think I'm having some problems here.
And on different iPhones, not just like you just chose iPhone 6, so they have like iPhone 7, iPhone.
Yeah, everything from the iPhone 5 to iPhone X to iPad, iPad Pro. There's a few Android devices in this list as well. It's not true emulation, but it can give you a kind of an approximation of how it'll display on that device.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that's really clever to help with some of these mobile issues is that you could set the throttling to a low-end mobile device, and that will simulate what your site's going to look like if you're on, 3G out in the middle of nowhere.
Okay, right.
So that's a great way to help simulate, some of the problems that you might see on mobile that are hard to troubleshoot while you're on Wi-Fi.
Mm-hmm.
Another great feature is the code coverage. One of the issues that PageSpeed Insights often will flag you for is having unused JavaScript or unused CSS. If you Google how to turn on code coverage, I might be able to show it here. Don't mind the errors, it's just my local environment. So if I go to console, show coverage, if I reveal this tab and reload, it will load up all my CSS files and JavaScript files and show me exactly what's not being used. This is great to dig deep into your files to see what's being loaded and what's not. Obviously, we're having some issues with our internet, so here we go. So you can see here. Here's a WP Forms JS file, and it could show you the red represents what's unused and what's being used. For example, the style.min.css file, most of it's not being used and could probably be removed. It's only 51 bytes, so it's not that big of a deal in this case, but it's a really great tool to help you kind of fine-tune everything. Mm-hmm. Those are just two quick tips I love about Chrome DevTools.
All right. Well, there you have it. We continue to dive in deeper. I appreciate it. Now, these are a lot of helpful information. Hopefully you found it helpful. I appreciate you joining me today, Brian.
I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, it was great having you. And like I said, if you need help with any of this stuff, reach out to us. We have forms on our site. Call us, whatever you need. We're here as a resource. And hopefully you were able to see some of the screenshots that we provided on our YouTube channel if you're listening to this on a podcast or whatever. But more importantly, we're here as a resource, so reach out. And thank you for joining us this time on Beyond Local.